This is a real treat. We're in Walnut Creek with Oakland A's insider Joe Stiglich. You see him on TV. I've known Joe too long. He used to be in the newspapers. Actually, yeah, Joe, start where it all started. I mean, you're local. You're Antioch. I mean, tell people about that. They don't know this.
Yeah, I grew up, born and raised in Antioch, and I grew up, reading a lot of. My first newspaper job was at the Ledger Dispatch in Antioch. But growing up, the Daily Ledger at that time when I was growing up was a daily, 7-day-a-week afternoon paper, which you don't have any of those around right now. But so I grew up reading about local athletes, local high school sports, reading high school writers like Kerry Young, Steve Doulis, Larry Espinola, Dave Taxier, all those guys. And funny enough, I had to go on to work with a few of those guys.
Yeah.
When I eventually got hired at the Ledger, my first job out of college, really. So, no, born and raised in Antioch. Had two older brothers who played high school football. Just grew up Friday nights watching a lot of Antioch high school football games and traveling around the old DVAL, Diablo Valley Athletic League, watching Antioch play all those teams. So, grew up. I just kind of had that in my blood, from early on. And so when I get to the Ledger in 2000 eventually and end up covering high school football, just a real treat because I always loved watching it. That's what I loved doing on my Friday nights when I was growing up.
Yeah, and that's where it started. But
Right.
also your roots, you now cover professional sports. You were watching these teams, the professional teams.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
What are
yeah.
some memories of
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Grew up a diehard in football. Grew up a Raider fan,
Right.
and pretty much when I really got into them, they had already moved down to LA.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Actually,
We got
that might be Al Davis right now.
It might be.
It's okay.
We'll just let that go right now.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. How many rings is it going to have?
It's probably going to have about 4.
Okay, that's okay. Something. See, this shows that we're low key. We'll actually keep this in.
Right.
And is it old school where you'll be able to hear you talk, or it just ends?
It's probably in the other room. I don't know if you can hear that or not.
No,
so
we're fine.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, that's okay. No, but that's also we'll jump around.
Yeah.
We'll get back. But
Yeah.
as I said, we're talking to you now. It's right 2 weeks before spring training. This is the time to talk to you because people see you on TV, and for whatever reason, maybe they think it's easy. But you're busy. To tell people what you do.
A lot of people think I'm getting a lot of autographs and just sitting up there, watching,
Eating popcorn,
enjoying the game. And I do eat some popcorn. And I do get to watch baseball. It's a great job getting to watch baseball. I mean, for a living and writing about it and talking about it on TV a little bit. But a lot of work goes into it too. For a 7:00 game, I'll get there about 3:00 in the afternoon. Clubhouse opens early on. That's when we get to do our interviews beforehand because I usually write a story and file a story before the game even starts on injury news and that kind of stuff. And but it's a long day. I mean, you get to go in the clubhouse, talking to the players, talking to the manager, Bob Melvin, and then watching the game and going back in and doing interviews after the game and rewriting the story. Yeah. So it's quite a cycle and you're riding a lot of adrenaline, and by the end of the night, you're kind of worn out just because, the most busiest time of my night really is after the game ends, the last hour and a half that I'm there, like all kind of, you're hitting deadlines and going in front of the camera and writing stuff and fun stuff though.
It is, no, but people don't know the game's 5-4, the A's hit a 2-run homer to win. That's great for the fans.
Oh boy,
that's not
talk
good
about
for,
a scramble.
That's not
talk
good for
about
you.
A scramble. You learn to write. You learn to try to kind of predict the future and write what might happen. So you start writing, however the game's going, whoever's ahead, you start putting together your story, the framework of it based on, I assume it's going to end like this, so I'm going to write, A's are down 6-4, they're probably going to lose 6-4, so you start writing and you kind of write your story from the bottom up. You write about all the stuff that happened early in the game down below, stuff that isn't going to change, and you kind of try to leave the top half of your story wide open so you can kind of write that as the game's ending once you know how it's going to end. But if you get a walk-off homer, you see a lot of writers pounding the desk and highlighting a big block of text, hitting delete, and rewriting really fast. It's a mad rush. It's a scramble.
But actually, you got it easy now. I remember people talking about like trash 80s, these old computers. I mean,
which I never had to use. Never used an old typewriter. Really, never used never. I was by the time I got into it, I was using a laptop, and so I can understand how much easier it is doing it the way we can do it now.
So I'm all over. We got to go back to the Antioch Ledger. The Verduzcos used to be a very prominent athletic family, and who cares about that anymore but me? But Jason Verduzco, I think I just liked him because he was like 5'10", and he went on to, I think, play the quarterback at Illinois.
Before that, he was a state champion in wrestling.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So my point, I'll talk to Kerry Young. Maybe I talk to Jason Verduzco. Right. And there's even another connection. See, they don't even know how they help me. So I just do this show for fun. This is very obscure, Joe. My sister's back in Washington, D.C. I see that the Philadelphia, this is like 2000, right? Thanksgiving weekend, it's the Eagles versus the Redskins. So I want to go to this game.
Yeah.
So I write to the Redskins and tell them that I'm from out here, but I want to cover Jason Verduzco, who's like an assistant coach, and North Turner, who's from Alhambra High School.
Right.
And they said yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
you were able to do it. That was your in.
Yeah, that was my in. So I got 15 years later, I got to go thank Jason Verduzco for that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
See, exactly. Or maybe, as I said, with you, as I said, you helped me, whatever, 10, 15. I jump around. We go back. It was De La Salle on the De La Salle sidelines. Is where I met you.
Yeah.
And I would say, Joe, who do I contact to go to this game? And you would tell me, and then I'd be on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And now I say, Joe, who do I contact to interview in your house? It's you.
Small world. Here we are again. It comes back around.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe, see, what's another good topic? Actually, we'll talk about Maurice Reyes, but you covered someone in high school in the Phoenix area.
Yeah. When I went to graduate school at Arizona State, and I was there from '98 to 2000. So during that time, I was freelance writing for the Arizona Republic, doing anything they would give me to cover. Covered a lot of high school stuff for them, and I ended up covering a high school football game that featured Hamilton High School in Chandler, and their star running back at the time happened to be a 250-pound tailback named Terrell Suggs, who we know
T-Sizzle.
Yeah, would go on to terrorize quarterbacks in the NFL, but back then he was just a big, bruising running back who a lot of high school linebackers had a tough time bringing down. He was definitely one of the top high school players in Arizona at that time. Just covered one of his games, got to talk to him for a few minutes after the game, and shortly after he would commit to go to Arizona State, stayed local.
Yeah.
Who knew he'd go on to be a pass rusher in the NFL, but he knew he'd probably have a future playing football somehow. And one thing I remember from covering that game was just the facilities at Hamilton High were just the best, most luxurious facilities I'd ever seen a high school have at that time. And now you look at a lot of the high schools around here, they have the same type of stuff. And back then, it was kind of something to cover a game there and cover that player.
And that was Terrell Suggs. And then also there's you do the A's, but there's a Giants guy that you saw at Foothill High School.
Brandon Crawford. He was, I first covered Brandon. He was a starting shortstop as a freshman, I believe, for the baseball team. Not a lot of freshmen starting on the varsity team back then. So I told you a little bit about him then. But he was a quarterback during the fall. He was a quarterback on the football team. So I covered him.
Was Sweeney the coach? Or
Matt Sweeney was the coach,
Yeah, I know too much.
Yeah, he was, Brandon was a high school quarterback back then. When I first went into the Giants clubhouse and talked to him for the first time, just reminded him of that, and kind of that was a good icebreaker, I guess, to remind him, take him back in time a little bit.
Exactly. It's also, I do this, I talk to anybody. What I say anybody, I talk to a lot of people. So one of my buddies is Gary Peterson. And the reason why I bring this up, we'll tell people who Gary Peterson is.
Gary Peterson, long time, still writes for the Contra Costa Times, but a long time sports columnist for the Times. Another guy I grew up reading. It was a thrill when I got to work alongside of him and just enjoyed, really always such a fan of his writing. Just such a good, blends his humor and personality into his writing. He was just such a great guy to watch from a sports writing standpoint and learn from, really.
Right, he had that column for 30 years.
Yeah.
And now he covers the courts. And that's why I'm hooked up with him, because when I'm about talking to you, Joe, I'm over at the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah.
Gary Peterson is down the street, so the Board of Supervisors is interesting, but when I want to learn about sports, I go talk to him. The reason I bring it up, so you had, we'll also get to Maurice Reyes in a second, but you had Maurice Reyes, Suggs, and Crawford. Gary Peterson covered Jack Del Rio.
Right.
Randy Johnson, and Jack Trudeau. And I talked, it's amazing, but the interesting thing about this, I talked to Gary Peterson about a month and a half ago, and then right after I talked to him, big things happened for both Randy Johnson, Hall of Fame, and then Jack Del Rio.
Right.
And I can see how we get to explain who the Randy Johnson, I think, was Granada High School, or one of it was either Granada or Livermore. And what Gary said about him, whatever, he was 6'10", and almost looked like he was placing the ball in
the catcher's mitt. Yeah.
And he talked about Del Rio at Hayward High School, both as a linebacker, but then he was like a linebacker on the basketball team. He was like a power guard.
Yeah.
And now he's the head coach of the Raiders.
Yeah, what a difference. Back then, all the best athletes played three sports. Football, basketball, baseball, or some combination. And now all the athletes kind of specialize in one sport. It's funny how things have changed.
Well, I think they're all chasing scholarships.
Yeah, year-round, playing year-round. Yeah,
okay.
Right.
I'm trying to think. That's it. Let's go back to the De La Salle sidelines, because I was there, and that's also, Joe, if I get more sophisticated, I have these games on tape. And like I have Maurice Reyes on tape.
Right.
Tell people how good Maurice Reyes was in high school.
Oh my gosh, he was so good. People when he got to the NFL, people compare him to Barry Sanders a lot. And back then, the same comparisons were valid. Maurice was something. He was a real short guy, but if you've seen his legs, I mean, he was built like his legs were like tree stumps. He had these big. He was just so powerfully built, such a fast guy, and so small, low center of gravity. He was just tough to bring down. If you hit him the first time, he wouldn't go down. He had such balance too.
Yeah.
I mean, you would hit him and he would bounce. He would bounce sideways. Almost, you remember playing the Frogger video game? It could move sideways like that. That's how he could move after he got hit. He would move laterally and then keep going forward. It was just the balance he had was unlike anything I had seen in a high school running back at that time.
Joe, I mean, when you say Frogger,
a lot of people aren't going to get that reference probably.
Exactly. Well, no, Frogger. We could talk about Defender. We could talk about Missile Command.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe we best not. We'll save that for the next interview.
Sure.
But those were all great games.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but then grab. So we have some visual aids. Grab the Long Beach 2001 there. Tell people about this. I mean, this was a big deal.
This was a big deal. I was lucky to cover De La Salle 2001 through 2003. It was a great time to cover them at that time because the winning streak was really gaining national attention. They really kind of became a national story during those days. They were playing out-of-state teams, I think, before that too. But 2001, they went down, played Long Beach Poly, and
I was there.
And so was I covering it. And depending on which poll you were reading, De La Salle was ranked 1, Poly was 2, or vice versa. But the hype, the build-up, the national build-up to this game was really, I think it's safe to say, unlike anything for a high school football game leading up to that time. It hadn't been done like this. There was just such hype because Poly had all these Division I scholarship athletes and everything.
Like, 5 guys.
5 or 6 guys that went on to Division I. Most of them went to USC.
Yeah, exactly. Mercedes Lewis went to UCLA.
Tight end.
Yeah.
Went to UCLA.
But then
Winston Justice was an offensive lineman they had. Herschel Dennis had a great game against De La Salle that night, running back. Darnell Bing was a safety, went to USC. I think he got some time in the Niners, a little bit on the 49ers.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one more guy.
Manuel Wright was a defensive lineman, who went on to USC too.
Right.
So.
No, I remember that because I went to De La Salle.
Yeah.
And like De La Salle would play at the Coliseum. I don't say no one would care, but there'd be 8 or 10,000 people.
Yeah.
I told you about off the air about the day of reckoning that never happened in 1998, where Modern Day said the streak ends tonight. They dressed 100 guys.
Yeah.
They came out. They had this drill where they're like doing jumping jacks before the game.
Yeah.
And I remember telling like a Bob Sanso, a lot of guys out here, but only 11 can play.
Right.
And then De La Salle got up, and then they came back, and De La Salle held on, and that was 98. And then just as I said, walking into that stadium there that night is similar to that Long Beach. I'll get in a second. Just seeing 25 or 30,000 people, and the Orange County Register front page,
Right.
And then the same thing in Long Beach there, where the whole city was waiting for us.
Yeah.
And so it was us. I have to be careful here. I'm us, but you're neutral. I mean, okay. That's why you get paid. And that's we joke. I'm all over the place. So when I go to a baseball game, it's a piece of cake. I go in and I talk to Ron Wotus, and then I eat popcorn, and I'm done. You're busting your ass. I mean, not quite like that, but I meant, And so I'm getting off track. I talk a lot, but that Long Beach thing was special, and another guy, he probably lost to history. I talk about every time because he grew up next door to me, Andy Briner, who had
on that team.
Exactly, he had to play both ways. So he had to block Manuel Wright, and then he had tried to get around Winston Justice. Because those guys just were playing one direction, our guys were playing two directions. And then
big size difference.
Right, but then also it's all over the place. But the reason why De La Salle could compete was because of my buddy Mike Velasquez, who exactly. Tell people who Mike Velasquez is.
He had him in shape. He was their strength and conditioning coach back then, and he was probably even more important to them in the off season, getting them ready for the season as he was during the football season, I would think.
Well, that's exactly it. The Ladder and Edson ran it from like August through December.
Right.
But Velasquez was in charge like January through June.
Absolutely.
And the point of this, sometimes I have points. I hope always I have points. But with that game, as I said, the fact that De La Salle could win that game, and because that was it. Long Beach scheduled that game. Also, movies. I thought it was like Rocky IV. Remember Rocky IV?
Yeah.
The fight was in Russia. Rocky was the champion.
Right.
He had to fight Drago on Christmas Day.
Right.
In the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
De La Salle had to travel to Long Beach.
Right.
And I talked to Terry Edson about that. He actually liked that because when he was at home, people would hassle him for like requests and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's probably more of a distraction.
Yeah. And so when he was on the road,
Right.
All he had to do was worry about game plan.
Right.
Okay. And so I think some of the other Derek Landry was on that team.
Derek Landry was on that team. He was a terror on the offensive and defensive line. Matt Gutierrez was a quarterback, really a great quarterback. And really, the passing game De La Salle had then was really something, along with the running game.
Because that's when Ladouceur changed it. Because before that, it was the Veer. And, and he knew that.
Then Gutierrez is quarterback, and they start going, multi-receiver sets, 3 receivers at times, and offense got really sophisticated, and they branched out and stuff. And that, but that Poly game was like so many of the big games De La Salle played. If I remember right, De La Salle got off to a pretty good start. And every time they played a big team that hadn't played them before, I think they just kind of caught the other team by surprise with the tempo, the way they fire off the ball, and all of a sudden they're ahead 7-0, 14-0 before the other team adjusts the tempo of the game, and Paulie did eventually.
Yeah, they also had to hang on for dear life.
Yeah, absolutely. Third quarter, I remember the Dennis racked up a lot of yards, I think.
And that's what it was, a surprise where Maurice Drew.
That was his coming out party,
exactly.
For sure.
Both Ladd and Terry knew what they had with him. So those first 2 games, they kept him under wraps. They didn't use him much. So he wasn't.
I don't think he was a starting. I want to say Nate Kenyon and Elijah Bradley, I think, were the starting running backs.
Exactly. He could have started the first game, but they said no. We're going to sit him.
And Maurice may play defense. I think he was in the defensive backfield then, but he wasn't an every down running back.
But he could have been.
All of a sudden,
they that was how smart they were.
Yeah.
They didn't want him to show up on the game film.
Right.
And then that night, I mean, I should figure out. It's called. See, Joe, your journalism and now on TV, it's called a video insert. But the problem is, see, this is all digital. All these exist as tapes in my house.
Right.
And I got to find these. But that's all. I talked. So I found Velasquez. Who still trains Drew? Velasquez.
Still, in the off season, comes back and works with him.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we'll have to get your Cal.
Yeah.
And you went to school there. Grab that little article there. That's 1997.
Yeah.
Tell people what this is.
We were talking about Gary Peterson. This is a column Gary wrote about this would have been the Cal basketball team from 1996-97. The year after Todd Bozeman left, Sharif Abdul-Rahim had gone to the NBA, and Ben Braun took over the programs. This is Braun's first year. Cal was not expected to be good that year at all. I was actually covering them for the Daily Cal, the campus paper at Cal. Basketball was not supposed to be good this year at all. They had a bunch of seniors, but not a lot of big names that people knew. They ended up having their best. I don't think they've had a good season since then.
Exactly,
I mean, they ended up going to the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Ed Gray was a Pac-10 Player of the Year that year. Yeah. They end up knocking off Villanova on the way to the Sweet 16. Yeah. Eventually lose to Vince Carter in North Carolina at the Carrier Dome in Syracuse. I was there watching that game courtside. I mean, just what an experience. But covering that team was something.
Wow. So as a young guy, you traveled to the Carrier Dome.
I don't know how we had the travel budget to do that at a college newspaper, but we made it happen. I went to Winston-Salem, North Carolina to cover the first 2 rounds.
Wow.
And then to Syracuse the next week.
You deserve to be there.
Some of that was during spring break, too. Didn't miss too much class, but we were going to go no matter what. But Gary wrote a column about this team. It was quite a team, and one of the stars on that team, Tony Gonzalez, who was obviously a lot better known for his football days. This is before he went to the NFL, and something about Tony, I remember every year he came to play basketball at Cal, it was rough going the first few games. Yeah. He was really not the best player. It took him a while to get in the groove of playing basketball, and by the end of that 96-97 season, Ed Gray had gotten hurt.
Yeah.
Tony was probably their best scorer on the team. I mean, goes from being the tight end in football to being kind of the go-to guy for a team in the NCAA basketball tournament. Really something.
But also, talk about that Bozeman mess where, I mean, he's paying Jelani Gardner, and Gardner's not even that good.
I wasn't covering the team. I just got into Cal. I didn't start covering them until Ben Braun the next year, but it was just a big soap opera, the way it turned out. And, Ben Braun shows up and just kind of,
My brother talks about this game at De La Salle where St. John Bosco came up to play De La Salle, and I think they crushed De La Salle. They had Jelani Gardner as a senior. Yeah. Do you know the name Shea Cotton? Have you ever heard of this?
I remember that name vaguely,
Shea Cotton was like better than Paul Pierce, better than Baron Davis, and just never made it. And he was like a freshman on that team flying around the gym. But that's my point, that these guys put their stock, we can't win without Jelani Gardner. And maybe I can find Jelani Gardner now. It was actually Jelani Gardner's parents that got paid. I mean, so I don't know. Is Jelani Gardner, remember a guy named Tremaine Folks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and then it did. It was 96. They also had Sharif Abdur-Rahim coming all the way from Georgia, to play. I mean, And that,
Right.
yeah, I mean, that was just so absurd.
Yeah.
Cal never got a guy from Georgia.
Right.
And then they lose, I think, like to Iowa State in the first round or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And then that's why it's great. The next year,
Right.
as a team, they go
Right.
further. But
Right.
there's more to this. You have to flip that thing over.
Right.
So this, my brother saves everything.
Yeah.
So they flipped it. So I flip it over, and I see Harvard Westlake beating somebody.
Right.
And that's who do they beat from Northern California?
They're beating Hillsdale. They beat Hillsdale.
Was that on the peninsula? But,
Yeah.
but the two guys on that team, the brothers.
Yeah, it says Twin Towers, Jaron and Jason Collins. So all these names you'd go on to hear playing Bay Area college basketball later on, and here they are dominating in high school. So that's crazy. On the same clip on the back side are these names, all these names you see. It's really something.
Well, that's why it's sort of like the B side on the album. You got to flip it over.
Right.
And then
Right.
the other thing there, I'm going to track it down. Read the last paragraph of the, or actually read the whole thing about Harvard Westlake beating somebody. That's the
Harvard Westlake beating somebody.
so like the bottom right-hand corner there.
Right at the bottom right. Well, this is Crossroads beating
Sorry,
Encina.
that's a Crossroads.
Yeah,
and it says, go ahead.
Crossroads Santa Monica was never challenged by Encina Sacramento. Warren Cash scored 24 for the Roadrunners, and Tolbert Laquan added 21. Baron Davis.
This is the key part.
Baron Davis had 19 points for the winners. So.
And also he was like dunking or something.
Yeah, it says nevertheless put on a shooting clinic and passing clinic, offering 5 spectacular dunks while contributing 8 assists and 9 rebounds.
Okay, so the reason I bring this up, Joe, is on Twitter, I'm close personal friends with Baron Davis.
Okay.
Because I sent him a photo of James Silas from the 1970s, played for the Spurs, who had a better beard than him, and he liked that, so he followed me.
Yeah.
But the key there is they messed up. They called him Warren Cash. See, no one knows this but me. See, that's actually Cash Warren, okay? And I don't know why I'm not going to talk because he is married to Jessica Alba.
Lucky guy.
Exactly, not too shabby. And so I'll send that to them maybe on Twitter and see if they respond because and also we know who wrote that is Damon Esper and Lazzaretti, both good guys.
Yeah.
And talk about that they messed up the guy's name, but it's not their fault because if you see a name that says Cash Warren.
You're thinking Warren, it's got to be Warren Cash, right?
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely.
No, so we'll track all this down, and I don't know, maybe people ask me what my goal is with this, so that people say, what's Brian doing? And I just like talking to people, but maybe by talking to Velasquez, Justin Allenbaugh, eventually it leads to me talking to what's her name, his wife.
Jessica Alba.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a lot. My brother David, he says he's one of the most cherished actresses of our time.
I think all you have to do is connect the dots, and it's
Okay, I ended up at your place here today. I mean, okay.